Hey all, and welcome back to Fuzzy Gaming and a new video on the channel going over the Reign of Ours Raider, but this time in SSF. We're going to go from Act 1 all the way through to killing Uber Elder and collecting the 4 Voidstones, and then all in the in-between. Now the idea was to do this as a series, but I was enjoying the challenge so much that I just didn't want to stop playing and record videos, so I decided to just do one video breaking down all the important steps. Now along with tips on how to progress the build, I'll also explain how to progress the Atlas, what methods I use to target things like 6 links, item upgrades, and currency. The build was actually really enjoyable in an SSF environment, and the build doesn't really need very much gear to clear the Atlas and get your first 2 Voidstones, and then you do need to target farm some upgrades to get it comfortably doing Maven and Uber Elder and the other invitations. Now the idea was to push it as far as I can, since I transitioned fairly early away from the build at League Start into a Tornado Shot Deadeye. However, playing the skill again, I just don't think it's a skill that scales really well at endgame, especially in SSF. Now don't get me wrong, it's pretty easy to gear to get it mapping, doing Alcongo T16s, getting the invitations done minus the feared, and getting all 4 Voidstones. But from there, I really feel it's difficult to scale without a lot of investment, and that you're much better off switching to another build or skill. The main reason is single target is not amazing. The other issue is clear is only ever going to be as good as quickly as your character can move, because you can't chain or fork with this sort of skill. However, that's why this skill suits a raider really well, because they don't benefit from things like extra arrows and chain. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the leveling. Firstly, I need to apologise as all my leveling footage got corrupted. So the footage in the background is from a League Start on my old account that I did a few weeks ago. But this part's going to be short and simple anyway, as it doesn't really deviate from the League Start trade guide, which covers the leveling in full. In short, you just beeline to precise technique and point blank, and then just always ensure that your accuracy is above your life to make the most of the massive precise technique bonus. You can take any nodes you like in any order you like, as long as you end up on the final tree. I like to front load damage, but you can mix in life nodes if you're not comfortable running around in Act 6 with around 1k life. As soon as you get a usable 4 link, then this will carry you to early maps. The only thing you need to do is upgrade the bow when your damage feels low. So save all your essences, alchemy orbs for bows, and ID any rare bows that you come across. There'll be filters linked in the video description that will help you when you're leveling. Now if you can balance your damage, Trinity is a massively powerful gem early on, and I'll try and get this into the build as quickly as possible, as it is a gem we're also going to be using at endgame. I'd recommend using Heist to get your gear ready for mapping, and pick up some much needed currency for rolling maps later on. Now do this for as long as you like in SSF, there's no real urgency to speed to maps, it's much more important to be prepared. Feel free to use Purity of Elements when you kill Act 10 Kitava if you need the help with your resistances, but only use this as a stopgap and get away from this once you are res capped. That's really all we need to go through in leveling. It's really simple, and there is a detailed POB to explain really how to progress act by act. So let's move on to what I feel is a much more important section, and that's progressing your early Atlas completion and targeting your first gear upgrades. So once we talk through what to target and how, there is footage in the background of one of my first maps after finishing the campaign. As you can see, I have got Purity of Elements on to cap my resistances. Now I did find the Queen of the Forest in my heist, so my character is a little bit quicker than normal at this stage, but the rest of the gear is all junk. And as you can see, even on the campaign gear, early maps are pretty straightforward. So what do you want to target first and why? Now obviously you want to look out for obvious things like a 5 and a 6 link, but the biggest improvement to your build and your damage is going to be getting a half decent bow. If you can find a bow with 2 T3 or even T4 damage rolls, this is likely to double your DPS unless you got super lucky in the campaign, so the bow should always be your first aim. Feel free to pick up an ID bows, you're unlikely to end anything huge, but probably early on it's going to be worth it. And the best way is to use Expedition and ROG to craft pretty much all your early SSF gear, and this can take you all the way to mid to end game maps. You can get some absolutely insane gear if you get a little bit lucky. So to help with this, I'd recommend heading straight to the Expedition nodes on the Atlas tree when you get your first few points. Then here, straight to Stream of Consciousness, then to Wandering Path to double the effects of the small nodes. It may sound strange to use it, but it'll help you not only get more Expedition once you get a few more points, but also more connected maps to drop and higher maps to drop. From here, you're then going to fill out some map nodes, so you've got a good balance of being able to craft some gear with ROG when you get Expedition in your maps, but also enough map nodes that you should never have a problem with your map sustain, Along with that, you're going to then take some small nodes to get current missions so that you can use them to fill out the odd maps that you haven't had drop. Now there's a full Atlas tree linked in Maxroll, which guides you through the route I took in my playthrough. Now in general, you need to upgrade all of your gear, so try to use ROG for everything that you can. If it's not something you've looked at before, we'll touch on ROG really quickly in a moment and go through the crafting and how it works. I'm not really an expert in Expedition, though I never really fully spec into it, so feel free to look up other sources if you don't feel that I've covered enough material. So we'll very quickly go through ROG and explain how I use him to craft gear. If you need more help on how to do Expedition, there's lots of good guides on YouTube. Same again for ROG. If you're not quite sure what my explanation is going through, go and look up a detailed guide. This is only going to look at the bare bones. So very quickly, ROG is a vendor. And when you have his currency, you can buy items. Once you've bought these items, he will charge you currency to modify that item. Now, the most common crafts you'll get on them are reroll prefixes or reroll suffixes X times, keeping the best outcome. You get a chance to upgrade the tier of mods or push one mod all the way to T1. And then you can also do stuff like add or remove prefixes and suffixes or remove the lowest level mods. Now, one thing quickly to mention, because people get a bit confused, is when it says removes the lowest tier, it's talking about the actual tier of the mod. So some mods, for example, are absolute junk, but they might be T1. So for example here, gain 4 to 6 mana per enemy killed is T1. If you add a T1 of this and a T2 life, it's going to remove the life because that's tier 2. It will always highlight what one it's going to remove anyway, so don't worry too much about it. And then the last thing to mention about ROG is the higher your level goes, the higher item level items is going to offer you. So I'm in my trade account at the moment because I ran out of currency in the SSF playthrough. And you can see that a max level, which I think is 90 plus for the purposes of ROG, is going to be item level 84 to 86. So you're always going to get good bases. So even if an item comes up that you don't think you can particularly craft with ROG, but it's a base that you want, buy it, stick it in your stash. You might be able to craft on it later. So what am I looking for early on? And I'm looking for 2 different types of items. I'm either looking for an item with 6 modifiers on it, and will hopefully abuse the reroll prefix and suffix to get a decent item. Or I'm looking for an item that's got 3 to 4 mods on it, but it already has good stats, where if we can add prefixes or suffixes, we end up with a good item. And when I've just gone through the showcase, we'll go back to my SSF account and I'll show you the bow that I crafted with ROG really early on. So let's say, for example, we wanted to craft a bow. Both have 4 mods and none of the mods are ones we want to keep. So I personally wouldn't waste currency on these because you have to firstly fill the item, then hope that it gives you reroll chances for suffixes and prefixes and hope that they're good. There's just too many stages to be able to get a good item out of that. So if we take this ring, this has 5 mods on it. Let's pretend this ring is a good base. So this is a mod that's quite common. Upgrade levels of modifiers by 1 tier. Unfortunately, we haven't re-rolled it into the modifiers we actually want. So you can upgrade or skip, doesn't really matter what you do there. So here we go, it's now allowing us to re-roll. Now it's got half decent cold resistance, but we don't want dex, we don't want 1 mana gain on kill. So we're going to upgrade and we're going to re-roll that. And it's actually given us a pretty decent ring. Stats is something you are going to struggle with on this build early on. So having intelligence, fire and strength is great. We have an open prefix just to craft life on it, and we're sort of done with the ring if this was something like a 2-stone ring. So now it's saying, do you want to upgrade the level of a modifier? Yes, we will. It's upgraded the rarity. Again, upgrade 4 modifiers by 1 tier. So we've now got T1 fire, T2 intelligence, T4 strength. And now it's saying you want to add a prefix. I don't want to do this because I want to craft life on this ring. So we're going to skip it. What I really want to do is re-roll the prefixes because they're not very good. And here we go. Reroll prefixes 6 times, keeping the best outcome. It's not really any better. Bit more mana and a bit of evasion. Fill all the empty slots. Don't want to do that. Again, upgrade the level of a modifier by 1 tier. Up to you whether you want to do it because these are the most expensive artifacts, but we will. And then last chance to re-roll the prefixes, which we'll do again. And now we've ended up with T2 elemental damage to attack. So all you do, go to your crafting bench, craft life. That now, if that was a decent base, is a very good ring for early on in the campaign. It will solve all your strength and intelligence issues. It has a T1 resistance roll, good LE damage at attacks, and crafted life. And that's kind of how you use ROG. It's hit or miss. A lot of the times you'll miss. Don't be worried to just stop a craft halfway saying there's no way this item's going to be any good. I'm just going to take it and then either vendor it or stick it in your stash for crafting. But just use ROG over and over again and you'll end up with really good gear for the campaign. So I'll very quickly just go through a couple of items that are ROG crafted. One thing I forgot to mention with ROG is when you skip a craft, you have to take the next one. You cannot skip 2 crafts in a row. My bow is something that I ROG crafted really early on. As you can see, the item level is item 79, so I only would have been like early to mid 80s at this point. And it was exactly as I've gone through the steps. It had the cold and lightning damage on it and junk suffixes. The cold and lightning was not massively high. I think it was something like tier 3 and tier 4. It upgraded the prefixes on the elemental damage, and then it offered me reroll prefixes tons of times, and I ended up with T1 crit and T1 crit multi. The crit multi was a bonus. It wasn't what I was looking for. I essentially wanted either crit chance or attack speed with an open prefix that we already have to craft elemental penetration. And this is the bow I've gone through the whole playthrough with, killed Uber Elder with, and it's done really, really well. All I've done, which I won't touch on too much in terms of Crucible because it's only relevant for this league, is I've just gone and unlocked the Crucible tree, and it turned out it gave me a little bit of attack speed to help make up for the fact that I don't have it on the bow. But the bow was ROG crafted really early on, and that's the thing I would target. Get a bow with crit chance, because the next step after this, which we're going to go through, is transitioning to crit once you're sort of mid 80s. So there is one item I've got left that was ROG crafted, which was this ring here. Again, it's nothing amazing, but this is one I actually crafted in Act 7. So as you can see, the item level is 50, which is the first reroll window that ROG ever gives you. So this ring lasted me all the way up to sort of early tier red maps. I should have upgraded it earlier, but hey ho. But it's got big life, some resistances, attributes, flat damage. It's just got really, really good stats for an early ring, and to find this in the campaign was really, really nice. So the next step is transitioning to crit and moving on to a 5-link. Now you might have had a 5-link drop by now. If not, you should have had the fusions drop by 2s and reroll windows and just general currency drops to be able to link your own chest, bow, whatever you like. I'd recommend doing the chest because it leaves the bow free for upgrades. So 5-link is mandatory to progress any further, but it is something that you can do like 100 to 150 fusions. So it's something you'll be able to do fairly quickly, and then you're going to need to get some crit gear. So do not switch to crit until you're at least level 85 because you need a lot of points on the tree. So I'm just going to quickly go through the points that realistically I think you should have when you transition to crit. We're going to take all these crit nodes here. They add massive amounts of crit chance and crit multi. These crit nodes here up to Heartseeker along with the mastery. You want to take your projectile crit nodes here. And then eventually you want to come down here and get these crit chance and blind nodes. They add a massive amount of critical strike chance when you blind the enemy. And then all you're going to do for precise technique, you would have been spec this way. When you crit, you go this way for more crit chance and then end up here. The only other thing you'll obviously do is drop precise technique. If you don't need the accuracy, drop these nodes as well. And they're kind of the nodes that you need to actually have in the build when you transition to crit. Again, all the details are going to be in the POV. Next thing you need is a 5-link, which you mentioned if you don't find one drop, you should be able to craft this yourself fairly early on. And then you need crit chance on your bow, which we've got here. The crit multi is a nice bonus, but it's not necessary. You essentially want a bow with, I'd say, minimum of double tier 4 elemental rolls, crit chance, and an open prefix to craft Ellie Pen because it's a big damage upgrade. And then you just need crit multi where you can get it. So you can get crit multi on a quiver. I don't have it. You can get it on an amulet, which we've got it here. You can get it on rings, but I think it has to be crafted with essences. And you can get it on jewels that drop as well. So crit multi, getting it up is important. Along with that, you can also put in crit damage, although this is normally the 6th gem that I put into my links, but it does give you a big boost to crit multi. You don't really need a lot of crit chance to make your build overtake precise technique once you get a bit further into the game. You can add things like a diamond flask in, which I'd 100% recommend, and get a suffix somewhere that adds crit chance. I don't have it on these because I'm crit capped without it, but essentially you'd have a diamond flask and you would roll a suffix of increased crit chance, so you can get up to 150% increased critical strike chance just from a flask. You can also add power charge on crit in your Manaforged arrow support. So basically you link Manaforged arrows with inspiration to lower the cost, power charge on crit, and frenzy, which means when you're mapping you're going to have frenzy charges and power charges, which is a big boost to damage. And then the last thing you can do as an anoint, which is a fairly cheap anoint, I think it's like 2 of the purple ores and a brown if we have a look here. Yeah, indigo and amber was close. This is a 100% chance on shocked enemies. As long as you've got lightning damage in your build, you'll be shocking enemies. All that stuff combined gives you really, really high crit chance. You just need a little bit of crit multi on gear, and dropping precise technique is basically going to give you a lot more damage. And if you can get a decent bow and a decent quiver on a 5-link, you're going to be able to clear the Atlas with it. I cleared the Atlas on a 5-link setup, and I wouldn't say it was super smooth, but I didn't die a huge amount of times. You're not going to be able to farm T16 maps with this setup, but you can at least get your Atlas cleared, get your 2 Voidstones. Then if you wanted to, you can drop back sort of yellow or red maps and farm the gear that you want to be able to farm red maps really, really comfortably, which again, we'll come on to shortly. But to summarize, at this stage, get your build transition to crit, get a 5-link chest piece, and you're pretty much good to go. So what we'll do at this stage, I'll just leave some footage running in the background of some of the 5-link maps that are completed, along with a couple of highlights of the sort of DPS you can get on the pinnacle bosses. You don't really need to know the mechanics that well. Even if you brick every ball phase at Exile, you should only be doing 2 to 3 ball phases anyway. So as long as you've got your damage, as it is in this video, you'll be able to clear the Atlas. It's not going to be super comfy because you're going to have to do horrible corrupted red maps that you may die. There was a couple where I used 2 to 3 portals, but all I wanted to do was get my Atlas clear, get my 2 Voidstones. Then it's much easier for me to farm mid to lower tier maps because I've got more Atlas points and I've got some favorite slots and some Voidstones. So what I targeted on my 5-link was getting a Shaper Guardian map done, Elder Guardian, Conqueror Guardian, T16 map, Eater, and Exile, and then that gives you enough favorite slots to be able to guarantee map drops when you use the Atlas tree that we're going to come on to in a minute. Now, one thing I'd recommend, and I don't know why I didn't do it, is get some way to be immune to chill, whether it's the bootcraft from Syndicate. I didn't, and it felt absolutely horrendous, as you can see in this map here. There was chill ground, which when there's big effects on it, gives you 30% chill. This, along with something like temp chains or anything else that slows you down, pretty much brings you to a standstill. So look early on to get immune to chill. I didn't. I was really lazy. I don't know why I didn't get it. I just wanted to get ailment immune, but realistically, the way we're going, you're not going to be ailment immune until you're farming T16 maps. So find a way to be immune to chill. It's going to speed up your leveling immensely. But overall, the Atlas was fairly comfortable to clear on what was a very, very easy gear to set up. And then what we'll jump onto now is what I did once I had the Atlas clear, because you actually drop back and farm yellow maps for quite a few hours, and I'll go through the tree and why I did it. So now what we'll talk over very quickly is the base Atlas tree that I recommend you use throughout your playthrough once you get enough points. When you've cleared your Atlas, you won't have some invitations and big bosses done, but you should have around 120 points to spend on your Atlas. This is the base that I would recommend. So here you've got guaranteed chance to get a map drop from a monster in the map, 22% chance for maps to be duplicated, decent chunk to get a Kirak and Betrayal mission, which are really important because you want to get your unveils, you want to get as many Kirak missions as possible for getting like Guardian and Shaper maps and fragments and things like that. What it also allows you to do is spec easily into other aspects of the tree if you wanted to target certain things. The one big drawback of SSF is you can't just go and trade and buy 100 orbs by making, unspec your tree and fully spec into Legion. Then you finish Legion, you unspec again and you fully go into Harvest. You can't do that because you won't have the regrets to do it. What this tree allows you to do is respec a few points and then you can go into the mechanic that you want. So you would have spare points at this point anyway. So let's say you wanted to target Harvest, you can go here and you can say, right, take these nodes here, that automatically gives me 30% more for a Sacred Grove. I've got a point here, there's another 10%. I can go here and get some points, and just taking those few nodes, we have a 60% chance, plus Stream of Consciousness, plus the base chance. So it's about Harvest in 3 out of your 4 maps. And that kind of covers off the tree. Along with that, I'll just very quickly show you the Atlas that you want to do when you're doing this. So the way to have your setup, at this stage, you'll only have 2 Voidstones. I wanted to target Legion, so I favorited Dunes with all of the slots that I had, bar 1, and then I just put a connected map to it, which I did Colonnade. You have to have 2 maps together so that those Atlas points work, where it gives you a connected map. You want it to be a map that you're dictating to drop. To show you how successful that is, Colonnades were tier 9, I'm full. I ended up having to throw them on the ground because I didn't want to keep extra Colonnade maps. This is all the maps I dropped when I was doing Dunes, because I was favouring Dunes over Colonnade because of the layout for Legion. And even if we go into June's, I still had 14 left after I've finished farming. And all you would do, if you then want to target different maps, you, set up your favorites again so that it's maps next to each other. And I will probably stick with this tree for the whole playthrough because it just really allows me to change into mechanics. Like, yes, you miss out on the major nodes, so you can't get some of the really juicy nodes. All you want to do in SSF is get the mechanics into the maps to get what you need out of it, and then you don't have to look at that mechanic again. So Legion, I have a half decent Legion duel. I have no need to go back and do Legion. I don't need to do that again. Harvest, I'll build up maybe 5,000 of each life force. I can then drop that, and I realistically don't need it for a while. Expedition, once you get a certain amount of currency, you can drop that as well. And then it's at that point, which is a long way away from this playthrough for me, you can then spec fully into Atlases, hopefully with a lot of unmakings that you've made up. So with the tree out the way, let's jump into target farming a 6-link, which is really the last bit of the puzzle to then go and complete Uber Elder and Maven. Now you've got quite a few options, and I'm going to go through all the different options that I think you should do when you want to target a 6-link. Now, as I said, the good thing about this build is you don't need it to clear your Atlas, so you have ample time to farm your 6-links while you're farming other mechanics and getting the rest of your gear together. So firstly, mechanics like Legion, Delhi, Expedition spit out a lot of rare monsters, often with a lot of rare modifiers on them. The more modifiers you get, the more chance you've got to drop 6-links from them with the Arch Nemesis type of conversion mechanics. Now it is quite rare, but as highlighted in the footage here, you can get 6-link to spit out occasionally. Now it doesn't happen very often. This is the first one I've had for a couple of leagues, but there is that small chance that you get 6-links to drop. Outside of that, they just have a chance to drop 6-links naturally more because they have more rarity on the monster. You can hit Beyond up for Tainted Fusions. They're fairly rare, but I think I've found 2 to 3 in my playthrough so far. All you would do is then have a corrupted 5-link chest, hit a fusion on it. You've got 50% chance for that to become a 6-link. There are Einar Beasts that give you a 6-link, but often it's just a random 6-link item. So it could be a 6-link axe or a 6-link staff, but it is an option to get a 6-link. Corrupted Strongboxes also have a chance to drop corrupted 6-links. And then if need be, you can use either the bench or tainted chromatics to change the colors. You can put sacrifice fragments in the map device, so there's a chance of dropping corrupted 6-link body armors from here. You can target divination cards, so certain 6-link divination cards drop in certain maps. Just use the up-to-date POE wiki to see where divination cards can drop, and you can favorite those maps with the Atlas setup we've gone through to make sure you're always farming those maps to get your 6-link cards. And this is probably the best guaranteed way of doing it. So the ones with the dungeon layouts like cells drop a 6-link body armor. You can just ping pong between that and a connected map. Yes, the layout sucks, but you can farm 6-link cards in there. Also with the Atlas tree that I recommended, you can spec into more quantity and rarity to make it more likely. The last option is linking it yourself, and it's very unlikely to happen because you're not going to get 1500 fusings very quickly. You could obviously, if you have 300 fusings and you have nothing left to use them on, you can take your luck and try and 6-link the item that you want, but it's not guaranteed. I think all the other methods are better. The one I'm going to go through, which is the one I decided to target, is what's called a Geomancer Incubator. Now, if we go into my stash tab, we'll have a look at incubators. I'm just going to see if I have any. So we still have one Geomancer Incubator. Now, these take a lot of monsters to kill. The way incubators work, you right click, put it on an item, your item gets incubated with this, and after killing 29,000, I'm going to drop an item level 82 6-link body armor, but it could be any colors. The reason I went for these is I was farming Legion anyway, so I knew at some point I was going to get some Geomancer Incubators to drop, and I've had 3 to 4 of them drop so far. The reason I've picked these is because other than pure intelligence, I can get any other color base to work, because I'm using 2 of each color. So if I dropped pure strength, it offers issues because I need higher strength requirement than I've currently got. And it's hard because I'm going to need 4 off colors. Equally evasion, I don't need the strength requirements, but I do need to try and off color this with 2, 2 and 2 colors. So the ideal scenario would be strength stroke evasion base, evasion stroke energy shield, or energy shield stroke armor. All of those 3 would work, because they're very, very easy to get the colors that I need. As it turned out, I dropped this chest here, which was pure armor and needed 177 strength. So I had the 2 issues I had to get around. 1, I didn't have the strength requirement. 2, is pretty hard to color because I only want 2 red sockets. The strength part was solved by the fact that I was farming a lethal pride jewel anyway. Outside of that, I could just get extra strength on gear. I didn't need a ton more strength, but enough that I couldn't just put the body armor on straight away. Now, it rolled naturally like this, which is the reason I decided to stick with it, because it's got fizz damage reduction of 7%, plus the 11% converted to elemental. This is a decent chest that offers a lot of defenses, so I thought I'd spend the time to get the colors I needed. And to do that, I've essentially gone to the crafting bench, knowing that I need 2 green, 2 blue, and 2 red. I've gone over here and I've just done 1 blue socket. I had about 200 chromes, which wouldn't have been enough to guarantee getting all the off colors just by spamming either this or just spamming chromatics. So what my aim was, is to get 3 off colors with 3 red. That will give me a 50-50 chance when I then try and put a white socket on the item of getting the colors that I need. So how do you white socket the item? You can either do harvest, but it's very unlikely because it's super expensive and you need a Sacred Blossom. The other option, which I was kind of already prepared for, is Jun. If you have Varici, which you've already got him here in research at level 3, he offers you white sockets if you raid this safe house. I think it's 1 to 3. If you go into a Katarina safe house, it'll upgrade him to tier 4, and then it's 1 to 4 white sockets. Be warned, it is pretty much always 1. Don't go in thinking, great, I'm going to get 1 to 4. Think of it as I'm going to get 1 white socket. If I'm super, super lucky, I might get 2, 3, or 4. I've never seen more than 2 from this. I'm sure it is possible. But be warned, it's probably going to be 1 white socket, which is why I say it's going to be a 50-50 chance. So it was a Katarina I had ready, went in, killed Katarina, stuck the chest in. It gave me the socket I needed, and that gave me the 6 link that I was waiting for to add my crit damage link, which was about 30% more damage. That then made me super comfortable farming red map, so I can then start the grind of getting all the fragments together to try and do stupid Uber Elder. But they're kind of the ways you can get your 6 link in play in SSF. There's probably other options, but these are the ones that I looked at in my playthrough. Now, very quickly, before we move on, we're going to talk over Syndicate crafts that you need to unlock to make your playthrough nice and comfy. And there's really 2, and unfortunately, they require specific members to get. The first one is Gravicius's body armor chest of physical taken as elemental. I don't run any armor on this build whatsoever. We've got evade chance, and when we have our flasks up, our evade chance is 90%. When our frenzies come in play, it's 95. So a hit is only going to hit us 1 in 20 attacks anyway. And then on the off chance we get hit, a small amount of armor is going to do absolutely nothing. So it's better to convert as much as you can to elemental damage. And unfortunately, both of them, as I say, are specific members in Syndicate. So physical damage from hits taken as fire goes up to 8%. This is from Corel in Syndicate. The body armor, as I say, can be 6 and 6. This is Gravicius in Syndicate. And the last one, and equally important, is unveiling either non-channeling or channeling skills have minus mana cost. This will be from Elrion. Now, for those that don't know, Elrion starts always in the leadership position of research. So when you first get into your maps and you're doing Syndicate encounters, if you ever come across him in a research safe house, imprison him, interrogate him, because then it's going to remove him from the leadership position, which means every time you hit research, he's got more chance turning up because the leaders don't turn up very often. It can take a while to get all these unlocks. Gravicius, I killed or interrogated 20, 25 times. Didn't drop me a body armor. I'd cleared my whole Atlas. I'd killed Maven, and I had obviously killed Eater and Exarch before he dropped me the chest with the last bit that I wanted for defenses. So the last thing to talk about before we move on to the gear in general and the skill links is essences and fractured items. So what you'll find is your ROG gear might be decent, but maybe it's not quite good enough to do Uber Elder and Maven, and you need to get some more damage into the build. And the best way to do that is essence crafting on gear. It's easier on fractured items. You will get fractured items to drop. It's just RNG as to whether you get any that are going to be useful. So I pulled out the only 2 that I would craft on, and that is a spine bow with a fractured T3 lightning base, and then a ring with 45 intelligence. The intelligence is good because it basically solves any issues you might have about intelligence. Spine bow is obviously going to be pretty easy to craft a better bow than what I've already got. I haven't done it at this stage because the bowcraft will take a lot of essence spamming, and I wanted to do this a bit later on down the line. So essentially, we'll get to the point where essence crafting, even if it's just spamming definite essences, is going to give you better gear than what you've already got. So if we take just any essence, for example, so let's take Essences of Torment. This is only Shrieking, so obviously there's a tier higher than this, which will be Deafening. On a Quiver, this will add 140 lightning damage to attacks maximum. The Deafening will obviously put on more. Flat damage on Quivers will actually give you loads of damage, probably more than crit multi damage of bows, because Rain of Arrows doesn't have any inherent damage built into the gem. So flat damage other than the bow, you don't really get a lot of it along with Anger. So getting these on your quiver can be massive. So for an example, this is a quiver I'm running. It doesn't have any crit multi on it. I have a quiver that's very similar, except instead of lightning damage, it has got T1 crit multi, and I lose about 7% DPS putting that quiver on. So the big elemental damage essences are really good for crafting quivers, along with, you know, you can use projectile speed, you can use crit multi, attack speed, loads of different things. We will go over the gear and what attributes I think you should aim for where, but just wanted to go through quickly what you do with your tree when you switch to essences, because you're going to want to drop for the first time Wandering Path, because we want all of the essence nodes to guarantee Shrieking essences and guarantee that they get duplicated. So all you'll do is just respec any points that you like. Really, it doesn't matter because you're going to be dropping back to white maps to farm them. Don't worry if your Atlas tree looks a mess, just drop whatever points you need to take Prolific Essence, Crystal Lattice, Crystal Resonance, and then Amplified Energies. Then you are literally just going to spam low tier maps as quickly as you can. The reason I say that is this node here makes essences super difficult in red maps. So even if you've got a pretty decent character with a 6 link, you're still going to take a while to kill essences in red maps, and they're likely to kill you. It's much easier just to go into white maps and spam essences as quickly as you can. Again, we can use favorites where we can. We're going to lose, obviously, a lot of the power from Wandering Path, but you still want to favorite 2 maps that have a nice layout. And what I'd always do, because you should be swimming in chaos from doing your expedition, is always do essence on the map device. So I think it costs 3 chaos. You might have built up a couple of free uses from nodes. Use it every single time until you get maybe down to 50 chaos, then you can stop. You just want to do a few hours of farming essences, then when you go and upgrade them all to Deafening, or just go to Shrieking is probably a good option because you're going to get more chances at crafting. Upgrade all your essences to Shrieking and then start crafting for gear that you might need a decent replacement for. So let's say gloves, for example, you had a base that didn't have anything on it other than life and resistances. You could spam Essences of Zeal to force big attack speed onto the gloves. You could do stuff like damage to attacks. You can do crit chance, different things, and it will vary depending on what you need. But you can target things that can get your gear upgraded. So if you do want to farm essences, which I do think is a vital part, but the way I'll do it is later on. Once I've got my gear ready to farm red maps, then I'm going to target what I want for essences, respec the tree, drop back to white maps, and just spam farm those essences. That is probably the last thing you need to do if you're not quite ready to take on Maven and Uber Elder. Okay, so let's run through the final tree that you want to aim for and the final set of gear. I'm just going to go through what mods you want on gear because it's SSF. You're not going to get exactly the same gear as what I've got. Now, this is the tree that I recommend. There's only really 2 important things to point out. Other than that, it's a very standard bow tree. Only reason I have my Lethal Pride here is because I have double damage there. As it turns out, if I put it here, which I should have checked earlier, I get better nodes. There's double damage. There is some Fizz taking us fire, but I don't want to respec at the moment to add in the extra jewel socket that I'll need, because I may as well take this jewel socket because we have to travel up here. But either here or here, you want a Lethal Pride, ideally with 1 double damage mod. If you can get something like Intimidate as well, great. But the Lethal Pride is not really worth running without double damage. It's best just to get strength elsewhere and maybe go through Brutal Restraint or just any jewel that adds some damage. Now, the change I do from my normal bow builds that I've done previously is that I would get my leech here and then I would take 10% leech. What I decided, since we get no regen anyway, I would spend the extra points to go Vile Pact, which doubles your leech, go down here, which extends the leech even more, and then take instant leech. It gives us insane sustain to the point where as long as you keep firing, unless something one-shots you, you shouldn't die. And it makes the build, even though it has no armor at all, feel really, really comfy. So I have farmed for an absolute age on this build. If we go to kills, I've killed nearly 430,000 monsters and I've literally just killed Uber Elder. So overall it took 5 of each to get the right fragments. So 5 Elder kills, 5 Shaper kills to get a full set of Uber Elder fragments, which is a lot of maps. For each fragment you need 4 Guardian maps and you have to get the correct Guardian map. In SSF it can take an absolute age, and this was with me, you know, boss rushing, trying to get as many maps to drop as I can. This last Voidstone can take you an absolute age, which is why if you import the POB you might be like, this gear is really good for Uber Elder. I don't understand how he's got there so quick. It's because it took me an absolute age to farm the fragments. So I digress. That's your tree. I've not got any other jewels because I haven't done any good ones drop. I have got a cluster setup available that I could put in if I wanted to and drop some nodes, but for now this is just a nice simple tree with no clusters. A deviation from the tree that you could do is you could drop this section here and you can come down here and path up to get life, projectile damage up here if you wanted to. I think it's slightly less DPS but gives you more survivability. You could then go and get the extra onslaught nodes here for a bit more movement speed and evasion, and then probably take the coal nodes as well with the spare points. But this is the way I went, but I don't think you'd be wrong to go down here. So some things to point out are, without cluster jewels, it's quite hard to get really high crit chance, which is the reason we take these blind enemies and crit chance. So when we blind enemies, we get 60% crit here, 50 here, so that's 110, and then you get 25 here, so it's 135% crit chance, and you'll always blind enemies. So that is a big boost to crit chance, along with the 100% here from our anoint. So that in total is 225% crit chance, which is absolutely huge. Now, because of that, I don't actually need to run a crit mod on my diamond flask, and I'm pretty much capped without my flask up. And I think it's important in SSF to look at your DPS without flask, because the bosses, they're not going to be up most of the time. It's no good having 4 million DPS if when your flasks are down, you've got 1.5. That's kind of it for the tree. There's not really much else to point out. POB's in the description. It is, yeah, pretty much a bog standard bow tree. Now I've gone point blank because with Rain of Arrows, you're going to be near enough on top of enemies most of the time, and you have to get a fair distance away to actually get the negative damage. So yes, sometimes you might not gain from it, but on bosses where you can actually stand on top of them because of our massive evasion and sustain, this is a big DPS boost, and I would run it. So let's go on to the gear. So all I'm going to do is go through the mods that I think you should look for on gear, rather than this has got X, Y, Z on it, because you're not going to get the same gear. So firstly, flasks. These are really up to you. I don't run a granite flask because we don't have any armor, so adding in sort of 2000 armor does nothing. So run a J flask with evasion rating. I've run an amethyst flask because I don't have much calcium on my gear, and then I've gone for curse effect here. I've got a diamond flask, and like I said, I don't need the extra crit chance if you do have a different suffix on here. So I've got 17% attack speed on this one, and then the quicksilver I've just run movement speed. You could do something like cannot be stunned, which might be better, but overall you just want to make sure that you are getting as much crit out of your flask as you need, as much evasion, and then you can really use any other flask for this other one here. It's up to you. You want a bow with at least, I would say, 2 T3 damage rolls, LE pen, and crit chance. Crit chance is really important because all your crit scales off your bow. However, with Crucible, you've got the option of maybe getting crit from the tree instead. You can get like up to 1 to 2% crit chance from a Crucible tree. So you either want attack speed or crit chance as your suffix with craft an LE pen, and then you can make up the rest in Crucible. This is not a good bow by any means, but it was enough to get all of my Atlas clear. I think it just helped it landed crit multi because it adds a little bit of boost that you may not normally get from a bow. And as I say, the Crucible tree is just what it landed with. It's not great. It's 5% and 4% attack speed, so nothing to write home about. Before we go on to all of the gear, let's talk about your Eldritch Implicits because they're very important. So I need defenses because I don't have any armor. So I've gone for Fizz taken as Elemental, as the Eater, and you do need reduced mana cost as your XR. Body armor, I think these are the best mods. Anger, increased effect, and increased effect of non-cursorers. But it can take a while to get the right mods if you're spamming them. You can get other good things like the Eater gives you attack damage. XR can give you crit multi. There's a few good mods. So if you haven't got many embers, if you hit half decent one, don't roll over it. Wait until you've got enough that you know you're going to guarantee the mod that you want. Gloves, you've got options again, which is why I'm on Intimidate. You can get Intimidate on hit, attack speed or rage on hit as your X-Arc are all really good. And then for your Eater, I always go accuracy because it can be slightly hard to cap. Now, for your boots. These are fairly common boots. I didn't get them drop. I ended up having to use a tainted mythic orb to get these boots. And then as soon as I did, I had another pair drop. These give you the extra 30% ailment avoidance you need to become ailment immune. Without them, you're going to need to roll rare boots with an Eater implicit and then craft ailment avoidance on them. So if your helmet, really, you're just looking for life and resistances. If you can get any stuff like intelligence into it, great. You want an open prefix to craft Piss taken as fire, simple as. Body armor, again, if you've got an evasion base, it's just going to be life resistances. If you can fluke some spell suppression on there, it might mean you can drop some nodes on the tree. But again, just life and resistances with an open prefix. Or go for big defenses, no life, and you can use the mastery that gives you 15% life if you don't have life on your body armor is also a great alternative. Now the quiver, there are so many good damage rolls that I've found for this build. T1 damage rolls works out the best because we don't have a lot of flat damage in the build. Outside of that, you're looking for life, attack speed, crit multi, damage of bows, and projectile speed is not amazing, but we take a mastery that gives us damage based on speed, so it is extra DPS. For bases, I'd recommend increased attack speed, especially if you don't manage to get it on the bow. The more attack speed you can get, the better the build is going to feel. For your amulet, you essentially want crit multi and attributes. They're the two key things because attributes are quite hard to get. And then obviously an open prefix to either craft life or mana cost of skills is really, really good. High voltage is probably the cheapest and best anoint that you can put on the build unless you crit cap without it. Your rings, you're looking for a combination of life, damage, resistances, and an open prefix. So I got lucky and had this ring drop, which already had -8 to mana cost. I've then put some fertile catalyst on it to get up to 9. It's quite important to get your mana cost at something around 4 or less. The reason being, it will mean your Manaforged setup works perfectly, which we'll come on to in a sec. So on 2 items, you want mana cost. So this would realistically be 7. This would be 7. And then if you can get better than lesser here, even better. So I think rolling the reduced mana cost with greater embers gives you the perfect outcome of how much you want to reduce your mana cost by. And we'll come on to why it's so important when we go on to the skills. The gloves, I wanted attack speed because I don't have it on my bow. So again, I've used Essences of Zeal to get that attack speed until I hit something else decent, which ended up being chaos and fire resistance. The belt, I wanted a Stygian Vise. As soon as I had one drop, I had 4 of the prismatic catalysts. So I scoured the belt, put 4 catalysts on it. So my resistance modifiers are 20% increased. And then I've spammed resistance essences until I've hit something good. As it turned out, I hit really good. I hit T1 life, T2 cold resistance, T3 lightning with an open suffix to craft even more resistances. Now the reason this is influenced is because I had an open prefix and I had a orb drop from Hunter, and you can get percentage life on these belts. So I slammed the belt with this orb, hoping to hit increased life. Unfortunately, got increased chaos damage, which does nothing. But if we do end up maybe replacing this belt, we've got this as a really good base we can craft on to target those life mods. And that's it for the gear. So we'll go over the skill links that I think you should aim for, and it's worked out best for me. The one thing I'm going to go through that is the most important are the 2 Manaforged setups that we've got. And it again comes back into play as to why mana cost is so important to get on your gear. So the first setup we've got is Frenzy. Obviously a link to Manaforged, power charge on crit, and then inspiration to lower the cost of the skill. So the way Manaforged works is whatever the mana cost of this skill is in your Manaforged setup, as soon as it exceeds 300% of the mana cost with another bow skill that you use, it will trigger. So because we have 0 cost, it's essentially going to trigger all of the time. So our bow attack does 4 mana. So this, as you can see, has a cooldown of 0.46 seconds. So you can see when it's going to activate, which is why I've got them on here. So if I hold attack, you can see that the Manaforged arrows is going off all of the time. So every time this hits, I'm going to get frenzy charges. Every time I crit, I'm going to get power charges. Now, I have added in a secondary setup. If you've got a 6 link, you can add another damage bow attack in, because I got fed up with ballistas. They are not there when you need them. So on difficult content, they just go down. You spend more time putting them up. But I think you actually lose DPS by running ballistas. So what I've worked on is a Manaforged setup that adds enough supplementary DPS that it's worth doing. So I think at the moment, this is about 600k DPS. If I had a 6-link, it'd be 8 to 900. And I definitely wasn't getting that out of 5-link ballistas when, yeah, I'm having to constantly reposition and re-put up my totems. So the links I've gone for, Burning Arrow, because it's got massive, massive damage. We do ignite, so we get the extra damage against ignited enemies. Lightning Arrow, again, it's fairly decent damage and it can do big shocks. Inspiration, very important because we need to get the mana cost down. And then Ice Shot, again, is big damage and a big chill. So they're just really good attacks that we can use with a Manaforged setup. So it is super important to get your Manaforged arrows to cost no more than 1 mana once we are the 0 or 1. So if we link, as I say, Inspiration into our attack, just look at the lightning arrow there and you can see every time it's off cooldown, it's proccing, and so is the frenzy. If we remove Inspiration, you can see that the lightning arrow is now not proccing as often as frenzy, which means I'm not attacking enough to trigger the cooldown. If we then put another damage link in, it gets even worse. As you can see, it's hardly triggering at all. And I think this is one mistake people make, and I certainly did on my first playthrough earlier in the league, is I just link loads of stuff to Manaforged. Like, yeah, it's great. I've got Frenzy with Culling Strike and Power Charge on crit, but it was only proccing every 1 second, so I wasn't keeping all of those things up. So with Inspiration in here, the mana cost is 0, so all of our skills proc, and that's super important. That's why if you do go to a 6-link setup, don't add in a damage link because it's probably going to lower your DPS. Put in another bow gem that does big damage, something like, you know, Ensnaring Arrow, Puncture. Doesn't matter what it is, it's just an extra 100 to 200k DPS. So they're the 2 Manaforged setups, and they're really important that you manage the mana correctly. 6-link is Rain of Arrows, Mirage Archer, Inspiration, Crit Damage, Trinity, and Ellie damage with attacks. Then we have our Mark on Hit setup that I've linked to Live Tap because we only have 40 mana. Precision, which I've managed to push to 20 because we really don't need mana at all. We have Grace, Flame Dash, Anger. I've got a Determination in here. I don't use it. I've just been toying around with whether Determination works. It's terrible without any armor, so we'll just take it out. And the reason I love this setup, you don't need to place ballistas. You don't need to manually curse. Flasks are automated, so it is literally 1 button. So what we'll just do to finish it off is we will do a very quick map showcase. I'm going to link my profile description down below if you wanted to have a look at the progress of the character. I'm going to carry on playing it. So we'll go and run a map. There are 2 mods to look out for. You can still run maps. They're just going to be slightly less comfortable. Reflect, we can't do, but you can run your Pantheon here for reflected damage. And you can just respec 1 point and then take the Ellie Reflect here. That will cover all your Reflect issues. You can run no leech, but it obviously ruins all of your instant leech, Vile leech, things like that, but you can run them. Equally, less cooldown recovery rate doesn't feel great because your Manaforged arrows is going off less, but you can run them. There is not a single mod that you can't run on this setup with a couple of tweaks, which makes things like boss rushing really easy. You can just prepare 50 maps at once. Any Reflect ones you put to one side and respec your tree to run them. And just be aware that when you've got things like less cooldown recovery rate, it's not quite going to feel as nice. So we'll go and run this one that we've got set up here. And at the moment, I've still got my boss rushing setup that I was using to get my Uber Elder fragments because, as I say, it took forever and a day to get them. And it is definitely the one thing I absolutely despise about SSF is how long it takes you to get that 4th Voidstone. To me, it should be locked behind something like Cirrus, or they need to change Uber Elder so that they just drop a key each boss and you need 2 keys from each boss to go and do the fight, rather than you need to drop 2 fragments that are different and it's totally RNG as to what one you get. So we'll just run through, and the way I'm running these maps is I'm basically just looking for the boss. So as you can see, we're already starting to trigger power charges, frenzy charges. When you're mapping, if you're one-hitting everything, you might see your power charges fall off because your Manaforged arrows is probably not connecting with any monster. But that's not an issue because it basically means you don't need power charges at that stage. As soon as you get to the boss, your power charges are going to go up very, very quickly to max, which is 4 in this setup. So I'll move out of the way of those before they kill me. I don't have Burning Ground on, which was a mistake because I've still got my Uber Elder setup on. So as you can see, Burning Ground especially when you've got other mods, absolutely shred you. Especially with desecrated ground as well. We could die without even doing anything wrong here because the ground is absolutely littered in degen, but because of our leech, we do literally leech back to full as soon as you hit an enemy, so it does help. So we'll go through and we'll find the boss and we'll kill him, and then we'll get out and close the video out. Actually, no, we could do like a Conqueror or boss showcase or something, just to show you how the build feels. So this is where the boss is going to be. So I'm just going to drop my skills and just stand there. Even if they hit me, they're not going to kill me, and I'm going to leech back to full straight away. So we'll leave that. We'll go and put Burning Ground back on in case that turns up again. And we will go and see if I've got any boss maps left. I should have plenty. So we'll go and do an El Hesmin. Like, roll them. You can roll them difficult, but don't roll them silly like this. Like, more monster life, less damage from crit. It's just going to take too long to get the boss down. But something like this, with enfeeble extra monster damage. Stealing charges is not ideal because it's going to make the monster pretty dangerous, but I think it should be fine. So we will go and Maven influence this one. Again, remember, you can use orbs to re-roll the maps if it's a rubbish boss, because obviously with Conqueror maps you have to kill the boss. So because I now have my fragments that I need, if I'm farming for stuff like these bosses, I'm not full clear on the map. There's no need. I've got an Atlas setup where I sustain maps infinitely. So I have no need to hang around in this map. All the juicy stuff that drops is going to drop from El Hesmin. So we'll just rush through the map. I'm not even going to bother with Syndicate at the moment. I've already got Katarina set up, so I don't need to do anything with those. So again, I'm just going to rush past this transportation. I do not need it. Make sure I don't bleed to death. So one thing I would like is a corrupted blood jewel, but I haven't even found a jewel that was worth corrupting yet. So it's one thing I might have to maybe spec to Abyss to maybe get some decent jewels. We'll just have to wait and see. So we'll drop the portal. And we'll stand here and hope that these don't kill us, because these can actually hit quite hard. So let's say if we do get hit, we're going to leech straight back. So I think that's done, is it? No, he's still alive, apparently. There he is. He's dead now. So let's go into Hunter. So bear in mind, this is enfeeble and extra monster damage and lots of extra area of effect. So all I've got to do is look out for his big telegraphed attacks. Now, by the way, I've got no sound on, so I don't know what he's doing. I probably shouldn't stand here because I might get poisoned, which I did. We could die here. Actually, we've got good cow, so this should be okay. We'll just flick a life flask on. This poison stays for a while. There we go. Job done. So that was with enfeeble and extra monster damage, and it's super, super comfy. So I've now got the build in a position where I can then, if I want to, which I might do, say, I want to take this build even further. Whether it stays on Rain of Arrows is another matter, because I just don't think it scales that well. But maybe we'll push it a bit further and see if we can at least maybe do the Feared with it, which will be the next video if one comes out. So that pretty much covers off everything. So before we sign off, I just want to go through firstly some notable drops that I had, and then talk through what I found difficult in the playthrough in terms of encounters and what worked better than I thought it would. So firstly, let's just have a look, because we have had for SSF some pretty good stuff drop. I've had an Aegis Aurora, which is very, very rare. I've had Calm Spirit Gloves, had a couple of Awakened Gems drop. All right, they're trash. We had Aventus Gamble, that's not the worst in the world. It's at least positive with everything. So in SSF, that's not terrible. I had a Redeemer's Exalt. I had a pretty good Circle of Fear, which is damage while affected by a Hell Device plus increased buff effect. I had a Gold drop. I had a Void Battery. Dying Sun. Had a few memories drop. We also had an Essence Memory, which I've used. Got a ton of essences out of them. Some Corrupted Dark Rays with Haste level 21. I don't think that's particularly good. Obviously, Cinder Solid Urn as well is a pretty decent drop. A Blight Ravage map we have from the only Blight map that we've run. And then there's some corrupted items. I don't think this is any good with the lightning damage implicit, but just some double corrupted stuff that isn't any good. It's just stuff I got from Vile Temple. Yeah, but Aegis Aurora, very pleasantly surprised with that. So it might be something that I look to do a build with in this SSF playthrough. And the Gull is also really, really nice if you want to utilize shrines. So let's talk about content. So we've done every unique map, and we've done every invitation that I've been able to do. So the Feared is 100% a step beyond this build at the moment. It needs a lot of improvement in terms of survivability and definitely DPS. I think if we could double the DPS, Feared might be something that's manageable, but as it is, you've got no chance. You're going to not be able to kill the first enemy before another spawns, and you're going to end up with all 5 enemies at once, and it's just, yeah, you're going to die. The Twisted, super fine. It's not a difficult encounter, same as the Formed. I've done them multiple times. I've done the Elder Slayers, which was the most difficult thing I've done on the build. Again, because DPS is not huge, you're unlikely to wipe out one Conqueror before another one spawns. And I ended up with like 3 or 4 at the same time. When you've got Baron putting degens down, Hunter spitting at you, Redeemer disappearing, it gets really, really difficult. And this was by far the hardest encounter above Uber Elder and Maven. Obviously got the full Voidstones. I've done Maven 3 or 4 times. I've done Cirrus. I've done Cortex. Maven, I actually think once you know the mechanics of Maven, I think it's a really easy fight and you can do it on little DPS. Uber Elder, on the other hand, I think if you die, the fight becomes difficult because it's something that you get into the zone when you do an Uber Elder. You get used to the mechanics of circling around, targeting one enemy, then the next. However, I do think it's a fight that you need DPS on to stop all the horrible ground degens from taking over. Like, you need to make sure you're killing all the monsters quickly before they drop the degens because they do a ton of damage. Now, I thought I would breeze through this fight, and I went through and I was too complacent, and I made a really stupid mistake on the first death. I think I moved out of his slam circle before it finished expanding and I got killed, and that totally threw me off, and then I ended up losing another 3 portals. So I did get it done, and it should have been more comfy than it is. But again, this is a fight I don't do very often. I do Maven quite regularly. I do Uber Elder once a league, maybe twice to do the Feared, and that's it. So it's a fight I need to learn a bit better. But on the level of gear that I've got, it was comfortable. And if I wasn't stupid early on, I think it most likely would have been deathless or at least 1 to 2 portals. So it was a little bit sweaty palms towards the end because obviously it took me an absolute age to farm those fragments. And if I bricked the fight, I think I would have just rage quit the whole series. But we got it done and got the last Voidstone. So that's kind of how the process went. In terms of positives, it was better than I thought for damage, especially on a 5-link. Clearing the Atlas on a 5-link was really, really impressive. I was really, really happy with it. And defenses, even though they look paper thin, they're really not. Now, I have done, I think, 7 Exarchs, 3 Eaters, multiple Mavens, Cirrus, Uber Elder, lots of Invitations, Cortex, some horrible juice maps, and I have died 83 times. Now, I think when I cleared my Atlas, I died about 12 times, and I've not once had any armor or determination in the build. Getting a decent life pool with Fizz taken as elemental and lots of sustain, if you pay attention, you're going to stay alive for the majority of things that hit you. Obviously, you cannot stand in a Shaper Slam. You cannot tank Cirrus Meteor and things like that. But the majority of things that hit you, if they don't one-hit you, you'll be able to leech back. The things that are difficult for this build in terms of damage where you can't just stand there is the Eradicator with Lightning because it's got so many overlapping areas of damage, especially if it gets anything like increased AoE, increased attack speed. That was one of the only things I couldn't leech through, along with Baron, because he hits so hard and again it overlaps. So you cannot just stand in front of Baron and hit him because if he overlaps damage and crits, he's going to kill you. Other than that, it was fairly comfortable. For Redeemer, I tanked everything Redeemer threw at me, just holding there, triggering my skill. Same with Drox. Same with all of the other Guardians, like Minotaur with his just hit, couldn't one-hit me, but had to be careful of the rocks. But overall, if you pay attention and you're safe, I do think for a build with no armor, because you get 95% evade and you move super, super quick, it is really comfy. And I do think it's pretty defensive for the lack of chic defenses, let's say. But that's kind of it for the video. There may be a second phase if I end up trying to do the Feared, but don't hold your breath. It may not happen. Thank you very much for watching. Take care and see you in the next one.